Welcome to The Teacher's Story. I'm Jackie Scully. This is a podcast to elevate teacher voice. In this program, you will hear teachers sharing their journey into this profession and their ideas for education. I'm kicking it off Teacher Appreciation Week, which starts May 2nd. This is about honest, vulnerable, inspiring storytelling. It's a time and a space for teachers to share their ideas for the future of education. Teachers are beautiful beings who give their heart and soul to their community. They're innovators, they're inspirational, not only to children, but to the people around them. And they deserve to share their voice. So welcome to The Teacher's Story. Enjoy. Hi, welcome to The Teacher's Story. This is Jackie Scully, and today we have Allison Teicher-Farhbach with us. And I'm so excited to interview Allison today because she has a remarkable story. When we met on Zoom a few weeks ago, this was my face the whole time. So I am really excited. She is an educator in New York. She's an ESL Coordinator. Soul-centered education reformer was a title that really drew me in because all about like education reform and coming from a very authentic place. Director of curriculum development and a co-host of the Inner You podcast. So another fellow podcaster. So exciting to have you here, Allison. Thank you.
So excited to be here. Thank you so much. This is so cool.
It is so cool. I am ready for the stories. I think it's going to be great. And I think the listeners will be in awe of you as we get into this. So my first question for you is, was there some inspiration that came to you to get into education or teaching in any way early in your life or later on?
So the ongoing joke in my family is that we have the last name Teicher. If you take the I and swap it out with an A, you're teacher and you're branded for life. I'm actually the 40th teacher in my family on the Teicher side.
Wow.
So, and that wasn't intentional. I mean, when I was in kindergarten, at that point, my mother taught me how to read and write and do all these different things. And I fell in love with books right away. And I had a kindergarten teacher, Miss Perot, and she had laryngitis one day, and she would always read to us and our entire class, and she'd sit in the big rocking chair, and we'd gather around on the carpet, and it was such a just core memory. And one day when she had laryngitis, she said, "Okay, guys, I guess I can't read to you today. You know, we'll color instead." And I popped up and I said, "I'll read to the class." And you would think maybe a 5-year-old would not be able to read a full book to a room of 5-year-olds. And she said, "Sure, go ahead, go for it. Let's see what you can do." And I pick out Green Eggs and Ham by Dr. Seuss. Everyone comes over to the carpet instinctively, and I'm sitting on the chair and I'm holding the book up next to me as if I'm teaching the class. And as I was reading the book to the class and everyone's eyes were lighting up because they got to be a part of story time for the day, I saw my teacher look at me very confused. And she called my mom and said, "Did you know your daughter could read?" And my mother goes, "Yes, I knew she could read. I taught her how to read." And she goes, "That's amazing." And I just really loved that moment, watching everyone get so excited over the book I was reading. And it could have been anything. We could have been doing anything, but there's so much power in learning and reading and writing and education. And so many people in this world do not have the advantage or the ability to read or to write. And learning, reading, writing, understanding a language, they're superpowers in themselves. So if you are fortunate to be able to read or write, it's an amazing feeling. And I wanted to help people create that as an educator. So I always said to myself when I was in high school that I really love my English classes. And we would read these crazy books and do these crazy things. And over the years, I started really realizing, you know what? I want to be an English teacher. And I went through college. And the first day I stepped into a classroom, I was like, yeah, this is cool. This is awesome. This is awesome that I get to share my passion with students. And English may not be everybody's favorite subject, and that's understandable. And I said to myself, I'm going to accept any and every student as they are, wherever they are, and help in some form, shape, or way. Even if education is not their favorite thing in the world, let's see what we can create, and let's see how I can help this student help themselves.
Yeah.
And understand that life does not just exist within school. There's so much more in this world. Once you graduate, let's just find what lights you up, what sparks your soul, what sets you on fire in a positive way, and then let's help you find your path and your way in life.
I love that. Yeah, that's beautiful. And it's all about timing sometimes, because that moment of the teacher not being able to read and speak gave you an opportunity to say, well, let me try this out. And you got that little taste of being a teacher at 5 years old. And it kind of then stayed with you, particularly thinking about reading and English. And I love this message of being able to read and write and learn and have access to education is a superpower. And it is a privilege, because there's places around the world where we can talk about even just women, right? And like, look at like what just happened with Afghanistan after the war ended and we left, is that now we're seeing young women not having access to education. So it is a right, and it is something that is a superpower. And I think that's a beautiful message. And being a person that's like, I want to be there for all types of kids. And we'll get into this throughout the interview about the types of kids you work with. And you do work with kids from all different backgrounds and love all of them, and come to them meet them where they are. And that is such a gift. There's not a lot of teachers that have that innately in them to want to have that drive to meet kids where they are, all from all different backgrounds. So it's really beautiful. English was not my favorite subject early on, but when I got to high school, I had some really awesome English teachers, and I excelled from being in like the lower level English in middle school to being in honors, and then fell kind of in love with it. And I went to history, but I've just humanities in general. And I love working with English teachers. Like, we do a lot of collaboration. So I'm right there with you. Any early on stories or any moments you want to share in your early years of teaching? It doesn't have to be your first year, it can be, that you would like to share.
I have some crazy stories that I think people would not believe. I mean, stories from, creating one of my students a couple of years ago, my first year. So I'm an English teacher, and I also teach ESL and do a bunch of things with ESL. And my first year teaching, 2 days before school started, I was told, congratulations, you're the forensic science teacher. And I went, what? Okay, let's do it. And I looked at the curriculum and I said, okay, this is manageable. And I had students in my class who were going to be forensic science majors and wanted to do things in forensics. And here I am, first year teacher, going, oh, this is going to be good. So I would do different activities with the kids. We were on the lawn at some point, throwing paint on piece of paper as like a blood spatter thing. And then we did some sort of viral video challenge. The kids saw something online. They said, can we do it? And I said, sure, let's do it. And I went to my principal and I said, can we do it? And she goes, sure, why not? Have fun with it. And we would do crazy stuff in that class. In my first year as well, I've been fortunate to work in a school that's based on the Renzulli model. So it's a school-wide enrichment model. And students get a lot of choice in the electives they take and the projects they do. So I taught mass media and communications my first year as well, on top of teaching forensic science and English. And we had an entire unit on creating music. And I told the kids, okay, we're going to go from music all the way back in the Stone Age to what you think music would sound like to what music would sound like nowadays. And kids were creating crazy different things, banging on the desks and making noises and grunting and songs and rap music. And we did such insane stuff, but the kids had fun. And no matter who you were welcome in that classroom to just be yourself and express yourself and try things that maybe you're not too confident in, but you had a room full of 30-something people who were applauding you and cheering you on and shouting your name. And that class was hysterical. And even in my English classes, we've had moments where we have debates. And I had a student who would come in and he believed he was Tony Montana from Scarface. And he would reenact scenes. I mean, and that's a pretty
Yeah.
risque movie. But he would come in and he'd be like telling the class stories about how he had meatballs and spaghetti on salami Sundays. And it was just hysterical. And then in my AP psychology class, years later, I had a student who brought in a plastic skeleton by the name of Jeremiana. And it was hysterical because we set the skeleton up in the middle of class with a notebook and a pen and a wig and a school t-shirt. And I taught the skeleton with the class, and they were all laughing and taking pictures and cracking up, thinking this was the funniest thing. And then I would call on the skeleton in class and say, Jeremiana, you're going to need to speak up. And they would burst out laughing. And some of the kids would come up to me and say, why are you letting this happen? And I'm like, well, why not? Why can't we just have some fun in the class? Like, we know we're learning psychology or English, and we're preparing for a college level exam. We're preparing for the regents. I have students who do not come from, well, let me say it this way. Some students come from very challenging situations, whether it's coming from a home where there's a single parent or parents who are working all the time. I have some students who are in charge of their younger siblings. I have students who live in a 1-bedroom apartment with their parents, grandparents, everyone. And I fully understand that sometimes in class, you're not always going to want to focus on, what is Hamlet doing today in the play? Or, what are we reading today? You're focusing on survival. So I always wanted to create a classroom environment where kids can come in and understand, hey, you're going to have a bad day. And a couple of years ago, I had a student come in and he was just devastated. He had such a bad day. And I told him, listen, it's a bad day, but not a bad life. Right now, things suck and things are hard. But it's not going to always be like this. And tomorrow, things may be the same, or 5 minutes from now, things may change. Who knows? And I always say to my students, is it going to matter in 5 minutes? Will it matter in 5 months? Will it matter in 5 years? And a lot of times with what my students are going through, yes, things will matter in 5 years. Though we always try to figure out ways to create a solution. Because yes, you may not be able to deal with certain things and struggles in life. However, there's a way to cope or a way to manage situations. And you may not be in control of your family members, your friends, the teachers in your school, whomever that you're speaking to, but you're in control of yourself. And if you can focus on your emotions, your reactions, which, trust me, it's very hard to do sometimes, then you can figure out a way to move through life. Sometimes successfully, but I mean, what is success? And sometimes things may be pretty rough, but you can keep going. And I'm not saying this in just the fluffy, like, you can keep going, everything is wonderful, because everything's not always wonderful. It's life, it's chaotic, things happen. But if you set yourself up in the mindset of, hey, I can work through this. I may not be able to solve this right now, but someday, one day, I'll figure it out if I keep working towards what I want to do.
Yeah. And so this piece that you're talking about with like the advice you give to your students, to me, that's the core of being an educator. We teach subjects. Okay. So you went to school to be an English teacher, and now you're teaching forensic AP psychology. Hey, AP psychology.
Yay.
I love it. And mass media communication. Oh my goodness. In your first year, what a load. I can't imagine. Like, I just got, something thrown at me when I was in my first years of teaching, when I went to Hawaii, and they're like, you're going to teach Hawaiian history and Pacific Island studies. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm a white person teaching local students. So this is going to go well. I better know my stuff. And the first year was awful. But they taught me, and I would tell them, like, you're teaching me as much as I'm teaching you, if not more, especially with this information. But at the end of the day, you teach content, you make it fun, you make it playful. I like this idea of like, let's just be playful and fun. I think that joy in the classroom definitely needs to be more so infused in all classrooms. I think we're losing that, particularly through the pandemic and all the stress we put on kids. But it's also about, like I said earlier, meeting kids where they are and talking to them like young adults. We both teach high school, and respecting them in the way of like, you're a human being. And like, I'm not expecting you to be a robot and come into my class and turn everything off from your life and just perform. You know, we often think, well, that's how you're going to be in the workplace. Like when you go into the workplace, you leave your stuff at home and you got to put on the professional face and go at it. And there's a piece of that. Yes, you do need to do that. You can't always come to work with all of your stuff, but we're also humans, and we need to know too, when we need to take a mental health day, or when we need to say, I need to be off right now because the work that I have to do, I might not be able to do my best because I'm having a lot of stuff going on. And I think we need to advocate for professionals and adults doing that. And then we need to model that for children so that they have that sense of agency. But they're kids. They're kids. We can't tell them like, well, this is how it's going to be in the workplace. I'm like, they're teenagers. And they're just learning, and they're still developing, and they're managing all the emotions that they're going through in puberty, and even right post puberty, all the hormones. It's a very difficult time just to be a teenager in general, even if you have the whole support system. And then you take away a lot of that support system, having a single parent, being in an apartment with your whole entire extended family. You also teach migrant children, right? And going through being an immigrant and moving and coming into a society where you know there's going to be pushback and you feel like you don't belong. And or ESL, you're an ESL coordinator. Like, I don't know this language very well. So there's so many other challenges, and you're just a teenager that's trying to figure it out, and you get it. And they don't teach you this in college, which I think that should, and this is something we can get into more with education reform, but there's so much more that should go into teaching training programs than just the subject and the pedagogy you're using. It's so much more cognitive, social, emotional development that, like, I think there should be more emphasis on that. You get it naturally. So your kids are so fortunate to have you, because again, they don't teach you that, and not every teacher innately has that within them. I don't know if there's more you want to share about just like where that comes from.
So I think throughout high school, I always seemed to be the outcast, or like I felt like there was something that was always missing, that I was maybe 2 steps ahead, but at the same time, 2 steps behind. And I always said to myself, and I had fantastic teachers who would let me sit with them during my lunch period, during my free period. I would always find something to do, to help, to this, that. And I was always talking to teachers and speaking with different adults. And I'm from a family teacher, so everything was always teaching, talk. And I was picking up things slowly. And I remember when I was younger, I thought I had a very severe hearing problem, because I could always hear on one side, but I could never hear on the right side. And I would always tell my teachers, I have a hearing problem, I'm going to sit this side. But then based on my last name, I had to sit alphabetically, and sometimes things just didn't work out. And I remember when I was younger, I was about 8 years old, I went to an audiologist, and the audiologist said, you're going to repeat some words after me. And I said, okay. So I hear her saying some words, but I can't tell if it was cat or car, or cup or car. And things just started to mush together, so I just wouldn't speak. And she came in and she told me, Allison, you can hear me. I know you can hear me, so just start saying the words. So I just started guessing when she was saying things, because I knew, yes, I can hear a noise, but I don't understand what this noise is. And throughout a series of different challenges in my life, I just would tell people, well, my right ear doesn't work 100%. So sometimes I'll ask you to say something over and over again. I said, it's nothing personal. And I would tell the kids that even when I started teaching, I said, sometimes I just can't fully hear. So the kids just said, okay. And I teach students with IEPs. I teach students with different challenges in language and at home and social emotional. I teach students who don't have a home, who live in a hotel room or a shelter or some other crazy living arrangement, and they need compassion just as much as anyone else. And I'm not saying they need compassion just because they're going through something or don't understand the language or have an IEP, but we all need a bit of grace and compassion and joy and support, because you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And I have some students who straight A students, everything seems fine. They don't talk about anything. And yet they're going home and living in what looks like a closet as their room, because their parents are somewhere else or something's going on, and their living space is something that you wouldn't think would be a living space, but that's their reality. So when I grew older and I started getting decent health insurance, I went back and I said, listen, let me figure this out, because something's wrong and I need to find the solution. Not just, it won't really change much, but it'll maybe help me understand why something's wrong with my ear. And I went to a children's hospital and sat in the little kids chair, and they did all these tests, and they said, do you know you have a processing disorder? And I said, no. And they said, yes, you have a processing disorder. What do you do for work? I said, I'm an educator. They're like, how did you become an educator? You have a central auditory processing disorder. There is no way you can be an educator. I'm like,
Wow.
oh, well, I graduated valedictorian of my, college cohort, and I am going for my master's, and I'm teaching in a public school in New York City. And they said, well, I don't know how that's possible. And now imagine, I'm 20 something years old when that happened, but imagine being a kid, 8 years old or 7 or even teenager, and you're being told, well, how can you achieve or do anything in life if you have this IEP? Or how can you just, and people will tell people, oh, well, you have a disability, you have, something. It's all a matter of miscommunication and misunderstanding.
Yeah.
Just because you're neurodiverse, or just because you don't know the language, or just because you're struggling with something, does not mean you don't have other gifts and talents and wonderful things you can bring to the world. So yes, I struggle a little bit with my hearing, but at the same time, that doesn't mean I don't know how to do things. And that doesn't mean I can't publicly speak or do some things. Sometimes I just need someone to repeat something just to make sure I get a clear understanding of what's happening. And I told a couple of kids this, because a lot of students were saying, oh, well, I'm doing this in life, and I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't. And I'm like, why can't you? Why? Like, what happened that you can't? And they'd give me some excuses, and I'd say, well, that's something you can work through. Just because another person tells you, oh no, you shouldn't be able to be a doctor because you don't speak this language. Who says? Who said? So let's try and figure out how to make a situation where you can succeed. There have been students who come in not speaking a word of English and say, I want to play sports professionally, I want to do this, I want to do that. And I encourage them to find a way. I won't find the way. They have to find the way, and I'm there for support. And I work with a fantastic team of teachers who are consistently supporting students, and massive gratitude to them, because without a team or support system behind you, sometimes it can be really difficult to face a lot of the challenges. So I know what's happened to me, yet that's not going to be what changes my story and what I want to do with my life. It's something to be like, hey, I understand this, and this is my solution. And I try to show students, whether you're dealing with anger management issues, whether you're dealing with not wanting to go to school, or not doing this or not doing that, you can still create a beautiful life for yourself. And I had a student who told me that he did not want to go to college, and he was failing classes and state exams and all this different stuff, because he said, well, what's the point? What's the point of me passing if I'm going to have to graduate high school and then go into college? And I said, you realize you don't have to go to college? And he goes, what are you talking about? I'm like, you don't have to go to college. There's different options. And I said, what do you like to do? And he's like, I like to dig in dirt. And someone might hear like, oh, okay, a teenager likes to dig in dirt. Great. And I said, well, do you know you can go to a trade school and become an electrician or a plumber, all this stuff? And now he is making a very nice salary as a crane operator.
Wow.
And it's hysterical, because, there's such a narrative of you must do this, you have to do this, but there's always another solution. Sometimes it's not the easiest solution, and sometimes it's not the most available solution, but there is a way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you relate to kids because you're so human in what you've gone through. And so in a way, what you've gone through with your processing. What did they call it? Processing.
So it's central auditory processing disorder.
Okay.
But the funny thing is, like, I never saw it.
Yeah, you never saw it.
I just thought I was half deaf,
Medicine,
and it's
and
okay.
we can get into that with psychology. They just want to put
Yeah.
labels on everything. They want to put
Yeah.
labels on everything and then tell you what you can't do.
Yes.
So then they can treat you, which makes money. That's what
Yes.
but it actually, for you, it almost is like a superpower by having something difficult that you went through that actually wasn't that difficult for you, because you found a way to live your life with this and have solutions that work for you. And now this becomes something where you can connect with kids and you can meet them again where they are and say, like, hey, I've gone through something that was supposed to hold me back and be challenging. And I was even told, like, how are you doing this? And I am doing it, and I'm excelling as a teacher and getting my master's degree and doing all these things. You have all of these other higher level roles than just an educator. And that is inspiring to kids, because they're like, well, if my teacher had this and she struggled with something, but to her it wasn't a struggle and she overcame, and now she's doing all these awesome things in life, like, that's something I can do. And definitely want to get into this more when we get into our last part, but yeah, the push for college, that narrative needs to really end, because it's problematic. With what college costs, trying to get in, the competition. Not everyone can get a decent career out of, their college degree. And this other, like, way of becoming an adult in the world is there's so many options for work, and there's options for, like, really important critical work. And, like, look at your student who's like, I just like to do this. How can that become a career? And it became a career as a crane operator and making a lot of money, because it's a very specific, dangerous, hard skill. And when you hone that skill, you are going to then be needed in society, and you're going to be able to get, like, a job anywhere. So that's an awesome, awesome story. And my dog is barking in the background. This happens sometimes during episodes. It's just, hey, it's part of being human. It's our homes.
Yeah, it's you know what? I tell the kids all the time, life's not perfect. And you can have perfect moments, and you can have everything lined up. And then I told my students, the first day I was actually in front of a room full of kids for the first time as the teacher, I tripped over my own 2 feet, slammed into a desk, and then I just kind of put my elbow down and, like, my hand on my hip, and I said, so who's ready to learn English? And the kids, like, started cracking up, and I'm like, I know what
That's
I'm
so
doing.
funny.
I totally know what's going on right here. And, like, from that moment on, the kids just, like, felt like it was going to just be a weird year. And it was hysterical. And I
But
just
it
told
makes
them
it,
things happen.
it makes the environment feel more at ease. Like, I think it breaks the ice a little bit. I mean, you did that, obviously it was like, that just happened, but I've done that too, where I've, like, run into my desk or something, or spilled coffee on me before class starts. But it does humanize the classroom, and it doesn't feel so rigid and so professional, and, like, moving away from, like, the sage on the stage, like, I'm the expert and know everything, and I'm going to dictate, this is my classroom, you're just in it, instead of, like, this is a space for all of us. And if we do goofy things, or things happen, or we make mistakes, like, that's okay. It's kind of like, I always see education and, like, the classroom as, like, a lab, and we're all just kind of experimenting. Like, we're experimenting with life, we're experimenting with what we're learning, how we learn, what we gain from one another. And to me, that makes it really fun, because you just, it is part of, like, teaching. You never know what's going to happen on, like, a daily basis. So kind of getting into my next part, because I think this is whoa, share. And I think after this, the listeners are going to be like, wow, you are a rock star. I can't believe all of this happened and you just kept going. So the pandemic.
Yeah.
How is that for you as educator, but also in your life?
One word: chaos. And I mean, chaos. You might think in life you have a plan and things will just go according to plan. And then sometimes things won't go according to plan, and that's okay. But then there's that slight moment of, yeah, things are going, oh wow, things are really not going to plan here. So leading up to the pandemic, I was pregnant with my first child, and I knew it was a girl, and I was due in April. And I was seeing things on the news saying COVID, COVID, COVID. And I mean, when I was younger, you would see different things like swine flu and different stuff happening within the news, and you'd say, okay, like that's a big deal, but you don't necessarily think it's going to impact your life on such a huge scale.
Mhm.
And yet the world shut down. But just before the world decided to shut down, it was March 11th, and I was working in city schools, and this New York City became one of the epicenters for all things COVID, and the hospitals were so brutally hit. And massive, massive kudos to the nurses and doctors who worked around the clock with no information, little information, to make sure people stayed safe and well. And it was a month before I was due. And I stood up when I was teaching and realized, nope, I got to sit back down. Something's wrong. And at that point, I was teaching my classes, sitting in a chair, and the kids go, Miss, something's wrong. You're gray. Like your skin is gray. Do you know that? And I said, guys, I'm fine. It's fine. And I just sat back in the chair, and I couldn't move at all. And then there became a point in the day where I realized, yes, something is really, really, really wrong. And I called the doctor, and the doctor said, well, you can't come in, you have COVID. And I go, what are you talking about that I have COVID? I'm pregnant. I'm in my I'm going into my last month. Like, can someone please take a look at me? And she goes, no, don't come in. Come in 2 days. If everything's, calms down, we don't know what's going on right now. And I heard phones going off and stuff. I said, okay, I'm just going to take a breath. My co-teacher actually had to drive me home in my car, and I made him drive past the hospital thinking that my water was going to break or something was going to happen, because I just didn't feel right. And then at 10 o'clock at night, my water broke, and I called the doctors, and they were like, are you sure your water broke? I'm like, yeah, I think so. We get to the hospital, and it's just a war zone, and things are going crazy. You see sirens and beeping and security. They're throwing a mask at me. They're like, here, put this on. You're in danger. I'm like, what are you talking about? They just pushed me into the hospital and said, okay, go to this floor. I go to that floor. They're like, what are you doing here? This is not the floor. You have to be on there. And I'm pretty big. My water broke, so I'm having contractions. And they didn't cover any of this in the parenting class about the world shutting down. So that would have been a good thing for them to, mention. So I gave birth via emergency C-section as the hospital shut down.
Wow.
And I slowly watched the world shut down from inside a hospital with just my phone. I had no TV. I couldn't really see what was going on. And all I kept seeing was panic, shock, fear, problems. And I didn't even get a chance to say goodbye to my kids because I was just about to go on maternity leave. And I'm like, what is happening? And all I would hear in the hospital with my premature newborn on my lap is code blue, tower, whatever. And you knew what that meant. And it was just persistent. And I counted about 20 different times. And I'm like, wow, this is pretty traumatic here. This is something else. And one nurse eventually came in and she goes, I'm turning this off. You can't keep hearing this. Like, if there's an emergency.
And you were by yourself?
So my husband was able to come in and out of the hospital because they didn't know what to do with him. Yeah. Things were shutting down. I saw all the major roads closing. And from my phone, I was just getting what people were telling me and what I could see. I really couldn't see much. And also, I'm recovering from major surgery while holding a premature infant on my lap. And I heard a glimmer of hope. And I heard New York City schools are shifting to online learning. And I said, okay. So I called my assistant principal and I said to her, hey, who's covering my classes? She goes, what? I'm like, yeah, I just gave birth last night. Who's covering my classes?
And she goes, calling the school the next day.
She said, well, I called out the next day. And then I sent them an email at 4 something in the morning saying, guess what, guys, I'm going to be out for a while. And it was mayhem, panic, chaos. No one knew which one was up. People were getting sick. People were coughing and someone was freaking out. And they told me everyone's teaching from home. And I said, so if everybody's teaching from home and you didn't get anyone to cover me, can I work still? Can I still teach? And they just said, I don't see why not. Like, I guess so. And I get home from the hospital with my daughter across my lap, and I made a video for my classes. And I said, hello, everyone. As you know, I was very sick that last day you saw me. Well, my daughter decided to come into this world early in the middle of a pandemic. So now instead of having one teacher, you have two. And I held her up and the kids are freaking out and screaming, oh my God, you got the baby. And I taught with her across my lap.
Wow.
And if you looked at my desk, I had bottles, I had diapers, I had all these different things around me because I also couldn't really move after a
Yeah.
C-section. It's major
That's
surgery.
major surgery. Yeah.
And I kind of had to just fight through it. I didn't really know what else to do other than be supportive and be there. And I had students around me saying, I think at one point I had 1 in 3 students who had lost someone to COVID in my class, in one of my classes.
Yeah.
And to have 1 in 3, I teach 35 kids. So people were losing someone left and right. And there was a lot of trauma, a lot of chaos. And in those moments, sometimes it's very hard to think and figure things out. And at the same time, we need to find the courage within ourselves to stand up and say, okay, I'm going to be a lighthouse. And you might say, be a lighthouse? Like, what is she talking about?
Mm-hmm.
But you have to be a beacon within the chaos to show, hey, don't crash into the shoreline. Don't get yourself in a situation where you really can't pull yourself out of it. Don't put yourself in toxic or negative situations if you can prevent it. There could be a lot of speculation, but with the widespread chaos that came as a result of COVID, it may be hard to say, oh, this could have been prevented. Can it have been prevented? Probably. At the same time, it couldn't have been prevented, and it did happen. And I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical professional. But at the same time, there's different things that people could have done in terms of responding differently. And yes, things were very hard. And my students, I wish I could have gone to each and every one of their houses and sat with them and said, hey, let's still figure things out, because your life is not derailed just because school went online, and things don't have to change. You don't have to stop learning because of COVID. And yes, a lot of students went to online school, but so many people just started giving up because it's like, well, the world shut down. Like, what now? What in my life?
Yeah.
And yes, go through those emotions, understand things. And I'm not saying this to poo-poo or disregard anyone's feelings or losses or traumas. It does get better. Sometimes it can take 10 years to get better. Sometimes you need to, instead of saying, okay, I'm going to go to college right after high school, sometimes you need to take a break. Sometimes you need to step back and help and support your family. And at the same time, keep reading or keep pursuing something that will bring you joy. Because if you don't do that, if you don't do something for yourself, if you don't do something to build yourself up, you're going to knock yourself down. And there was a quote I found when I was going through some very tough times when I graduated high school and I was starting college. And I really didn't have teachers who I could have called up and said, hey, I'm going through some tough times. What do I do? And social media was not that common back then. And I found this quote that said, rock bottom became the solid foundation in which I rebuilt my life. And I kept that on my folder. And I said, today's not great. Tomorrow's not looking too great either. But one day I'm going to build the world I really, really hoped for. And slowly but surely, it came true. And not just from me sitting still. And I tell my students all the time, it takes hard work. It takes discipline. It takes determination. Because right now, you can go on your phone and you can do whatever you want. You can sit in class and say, this is boring, whatever. I tell my students all the time, math was not my favorite subject. And yet I would sit in math class and I'd be disciplined and I'd study and I'd try, because I knew in order to get to becoming an English teacher and a mom and all these other beautiful things I wanted in my life, I needed to do hard stuff first. We can do hard things. We can do the stuff that we never could have imagined would happen, and we can get through it. And when you're going through chaos, such as the pandemic or other things in life, it can be rough. And you might think, well, there's no way out of this. But there's always a light within you. And if you stand tall, and sometimes you can't stand tall, sometimes you have to, and I'm saying metaphorically, sometimes you need to sit and say, okay, I need to figure things out for myself. I need to have my like silent period, my quiet stage. But one day you will be able to stand up and say, okay, yes, there is a light within me. Yes, there is something I'm good at, or something I appreciate, or something that I can be a part of, and I can shine. And I can do what I need to do to accomplish the things I want in life. And sometimes we need to change course a little bit, or get a little bit more general, or do something as a hobby until something works out. But things are possible. It's just a matter of time. And I used to say in high school that I wanted to publish a book, and I knew writing was hard. And then as I got older, I worked hard at it, and then I published 4 books.
Wow.
And
that's amazing.
Thank you. And when I told one student about it, she goes, wait, like books, like real books? I'm like, yeah, books. And she's like, book books. And she just sat there like in disbelief. I'm like, you can do it too. If you want to do this, you can do it. And I tell the kids all the time, as long as you're not hurting yourself or hurting other people, do what makes you happy. Sometimes you have to figure out different solutions and puzzle pieces and things to build up that happiness, because you can't just like snap your fingers and be like, poof, like it's all here. But you have to sometimes work on what's in your soul. And you have to focus on, I really love this. It really brings me joy, it brings me happiness. And I'm going to do better for myself. And I tell students sometimes who get jealous of other people or whatever's going on, do better for you. Look at them and be like, cool, celebrate them. Yes. That's awesome. They're doing what they're doing. But you don't want to be them. You have to be you. You're not swapping lives, things like that. You need to be you, do you, for you, and work from there. And the population of kids I work with, many of them are struggling with quite a lot, whether it's migration, whether it's being undocumented and trying to figure out how to pay for college. But there's a way. There's so many different ways. Sometimes it's a matter of finding resources or speaking to people or building a network, but there's a way. It may not be A to B. It may be A to 7 to 12 to another alphabet to some squiggly line. I don't know what this thing is, to B. But there's a way.
Wow. This is like our first conversation. I'm just going to be really honest. Like, I don't even know what to say. I'm going to be like, no, I'm going to be like the host right now. That's like, I have so many things to say, yet I have nothing to say. And that right there just shows how powerful your story is, because it's incredible. Like I'm listening to you, and it's not just your story, just the way you're talking and making these connections between you and what you're going through and your students. It's just, it's very special. Like you're not like a human a lot of people come across. I mean that, like I say that, and especially teachers. And like I've interviewed, and again, what people need to do with their lives, that's what they need to do with their lives. But I've interviewed teachers who have left their profession or just really shared about a lot of the challenges of the pandemic, the challenges of just teaching in general. When we get to education reform, just a lot of the problems, but then we want to come up with the solutions. But my goal for this project, this podcast, and just the work I want to continue to do is almost like finding these special humans and sharing their story, because it's just incredible. Like the inspiration's incredible. And it's very easy to, and I will admit, I was the person during the pandemic, the height of the pandemic, that was very angry, very frustrated. And I didn't even go through that much. Like besides teaching online, I'm fortunate. I didn't have anyone get really, really sick in my life. I didn't lose anyone. I had some students that did. Our home life was pretty much, we were locked in our home, but like, I didn't really go through that much. And I was frustrated, and I was angry, and I got caught up in the chaos. I got caught up in the tit for tat and like what's right and wrong, and like, they're not doing this right, they're not doing this right. And all of the news media got me into this like tornado. And it didn't take until I had almost like, I didn't have a rock bottom completely, but I had some people leave me in my life, some good friends. And now it's like, it's a gift. I see it as. But until like 2021, really the height of 2022, I didn't get it. Like, I was in that tornado. And for you to have a baby literally at lockdown and go through all that and then teach when you didn't have to do that, no one would, they'd figure out a sub somehow. And I know that would have been challenging, but you cared so much for your students, and that you're like, well, I'm at home and I'm going to be human and I'm going to have my baby on the lap. And we have 2 teachers now, and making still like this like fun kind of joyful experience with your students online. I just, it's very admirable. I don't know how you do it. I think you're a very special person, because it's a light that you have, and your students that get to learn from you, and just also, sorry, my headphones fell out, get to, collaborate with you as a teacher. They're very lucky, like very, very lucky. Yeah. It's just inspiring. And everything you're saying is like what we need to be sharing with our students on a daily basis. But it is hard sometimes as an adult, when we're going through hard things, for us to be there completely for our students. It like, we have to normalize, like, it's okay for us not to be okay. Like, it's okay for the teacher not to be inspiring every day. Or, I remember the one thing I did actually appreciate about the lockdown when we were on Zoom together was we just talked. Like, there were times where like, I'm not going to just teach a history lesson. We did what we needed to get done. And luckily my school allowed us to like pause on the grades. Like, we could end the year grade with 3rd quarter, and just 4th quarter was like, if you did well, we'll add it in. If not, it's okay. And I thought that was such a great way to have grace with the kids and with the teachers too. But we just talked and we shared. And I was probably the most honest and vulnerable I've ever been as a teacher, which now that comes out sometimes in the classroom now. I think it was a way that the pandemic, a silver lining, humanized me as a teacher and brought some of what you're doing and what you were doing even before the pandemic. I'm now, having those conversations with kids, because I see teaching so much more than I'm teaching history or psychology. I'm like, I'm trying to just be there with you as a human and give you maybe a glimpse into the future, that everything's going to be okay. And you can do what you want to do, even if it has this long, windy, squiggly road. It's okay, because that's part of life too. It's the adventure to get there. It's just a really beautiful message. So thank you for sharing that. I still can't believe you went through all of that. And
it's something else, let me tell you.
It's something else. So I know we've already been talking about this, but like for you especially, like, what are key areas of education in general? And you can even just focus on like what you see in your one particular school or region, that we really can shift and change to really bring education where it needs to be in this time period. Like, almost like, maybe what can we learn from the pandemic or take away, but anything that comes to mind. And maybe it's just the work that you're doing. Maybe we just need to learn from you, and you could be like a teacher mentor to the rest of us.
Well, do you have about 6 hours for me to go through my entire thought process and plan of what we can do to not just reform it? Because there's so many people who say, let's reform education. And that's awesome. Yes, let's change things. But we have to disrupt education. We have to just take things and just get nuts. And I'm not saying get nuts in necessarily a negative way, but really shift things. Because the population of students we have now is not the population of students we've always had. So there needs to be some pretty revolutionary, different things within this world that can really push education forward. And we need to do things in a way that embraces students' gifts and talents and passions and things that get them excited. Because we're also looking at these phones and TikTok. And I had a student who was looking at some video on TikTok in class, and I said, "What are you doing?" And it was a video of people just slapping each other in the face. And I said, "What are you learning from that?" And he just laughed at me. He goes, huh, huh, huh. I'm like, okay, like that's interesting. And I'm not saying phones are the downfall, because phones can create so many different opportunities and connect us and bring us together. I think, well, first things first, we need to, as a society, build a sense of inner peace within ourselves. If we are not content or happy or okay with ourselves, and yes, we're constantly changing, so it's, 1 second you can be happy instead, but really building that sense of inner peace, then there's going to be outer chaos. If you're going through life looking at other people and saying, "Oh, I'm jealous of this one. Oh, I need to entertain myself with a phone because I don't like my life," or "I don't like this," there's so much chaos in the world. Yes, teenagers are going to want to go on their phones and use their phones, because outside world is scary. There's a lot of stuff going on. But building that sense of inner peace, whether it's through things like meditation, and it's different for everyone, meditation or reading or finding that one thing that really gets you excited, that can help you bring that inner peace. Because so many students I work with say, "Oh, well, look at that person on social media. Like, they're just making money off of YouTube." And I'm like, yes, good for that person. If you can do that, excellent. And at the same time, build a life for yourself. Appreciate and cheer on other people. But when are you going to cheer on yourself? When are you going to bring yourself to a situation where you're happy with who you are, or happy with what you are currently and are building towards something else? There's always a way to find that power within you and then just put it out there in the world. And I'm not saying you have to, every single person in the world has to shine this big bright lighthouse and like be like, "Wow, I am the brightest lighthouse in the world." But saying something positive to someone, like, "Hey, you look really good in that color. That's cool." Or, "Wow, did you ever there was one student, she's very quiet and she's a really good writer, like really, really good writer." And I said to her, "Have you ever considered writing, like actually writing?" And I said, "What do you want to do?" And she goes, "Oh, I want to go to college for," I think it was maybe dentistry or something. I said, "Well, if you want to make some extra money, look for like blogs and things like that, or create a blog and just start writing." And I just saw like a little smirk, and she just kind of tucked back into her phone. But then every time I would pass her, she was looking up online how to become a writer.
Oh, I love that.
And
I
was going to say, put your phone away, but at the same time, I'm like, no, don't put your phone away. Go, you go, girl. Go figure it out. Go find yourself. And I think that's what students need.
Yeah.
That reminder that they're awesome. And everyone, and you could say, well, you can't say everyone's awesome. No, everyone's awesome in their own way. Everyone's amazing in their own way. And we can always reuse those words, but let's face it, like everyone has something unique about them. Every single person, even identical twins, I don't think have the same fingerprints. Like, or they may have the same DNA, but they're not the same. You can live in the same house with siblings, but you're all seeing things differently. You can tell tons of people the same message, but everyone's getting something different. And I think in order to really reform, and I say that in quotes, education, we need to start with the peace part of it. Looking at the soul, looking within ourselves and reflecting, how can I be a better person for me? How can I be a better person for friends, for family, for whomever? And then work from there. Second thing we need to do is look at curriculum. Where are we giving those elements of student choice? Where are we giving those moments for kids to explore and make mistakes and do goofy things, where they're not going to be penalized for it? Where they're going to be like, wow, like you did this thing and it's awesome, but this is not what the prompt says. You're not going to get judged for this. But at the same time, let's try and rework things a little bit.
Yeah.
Keep this though. Don't get rid of this. We need those moments. And we need that spark of joy and happiness in school again. Those like haha silly moments. Those, students, for example, years ago, the one who thought he was Tony Montana and talking about salami sundaes. The ones who are eager to just do fun, cool, exciting different things, the ones who can find it in themselves to accept themselves in this given moment and find that peace and then bring themselves out into the world. Because let's face it, sometimes humans can be mean. Sometimes people can do things that aren't so nice. I've had people in my life who, the second my book was published, yelled at me and said, "Why are you publishing a book? That's not what you're supposed to be doing."
Let's say that.
I was like, what am I supposed to be doing? Am I supposed to do this wrong? Like, I don't know, my name's on it. I don't see any errors. I was like, what? Huh? And then I realized it was like a point of jealousy.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh. And I said, wait, so there really isn't anything wrong with me. It's just something that person's going to go through and grow through. And one of my favorite sayings is grow through what you go through, because we're always growing, we're always building. And if we bring that, I feel like if we bring, and who am I? I'm not an expert, but if we bring that mindset into life and education and raising a family and being a parent and doing all these different things, maybe we'd have a different world. Yeah. And I remember in Miss Congeniality, the Sandra Bullock movie, they were always talking, like quoting this in the middle of everything. They were talking about what is one thing you want for the world, and everyone just goes, world peace, and they're all like clapping and like, yay, world peace. And then Sandra Bullock comes in and she's trying to give a solution, something else, and everyone's just very quiet, and they go, and world peace, and they all start clapping. Like, that was a bit of a joke, but at the same time, I don't feel like it is a joke, because if we look at solutions and have those hard conversations and have those moments of we're going to build and we're going to do and we're going to work and we're going to sweat. I consistently admire my current principal. I doubt he'll ever hear this, but I won't mention his name. He was a principal for only like 2 months, and then the entire world shut down because of COVID. Oh. Brand new principal.
Wow.
And he busted his butt every single day. And I never got the chance to say, I really admire you for meeting a team a day before everything shut down. You had a woman just go into labor in the middle of your school. And then the world shut down and you're trying to figure out your stuff and the school stuff. And now you're a new principal and you have all these different things. And I think we need more people who are just willing to, when things get crazy, step up and say, okay, let's do it. Let's just try it. And I admire him. I admire so many leaders. My former principal, she would always give us the power to, we can walk into her office and say, I want to try this. And she'd say, sure, let's do it. And if it worked, cool. If it didn't, awesome. Like, there's so many examples of people. And I hope that the people I mentioned and anyone who's listening, you find that strength within you to empower yourself to go forward and do the thing. Don't know what the thing is, but insert thing here. Okay. So do the blank, add in your blank. Write the book, do the performance, create the play you always wanted to create, make a musical, build something based on like the materials you find in the garbage, like do something that will make you happy and not hurt yourself or others. Okay. And there may be instances where, have slip ups and accidentally, give yourself a paper cut. That's not what I'm talking about, but do something that will really make you happy, not for others. Maybe you're creating something for somebody else, but do something to bring yourself happiness. And I think that's like the big thing. And I think that's the thing that the pandemic taught us. Teachers teach us all the time. We teach ourselves all the time. And I think sometimes it's something we have to remind ourselves. Just do the thing. Figure it out. It'll look great. It won't look great. You never know. You never know until you try. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Wayne Gretzky.
I love that quote too. Yeah, I just feel like we need to humanize education. Humanize like so many areas of the society. But listening to this, it reminds me of, I was listening to some like spiritual podcasts because I'm into those now. So about this is like an age of consciousness. It's like a neo-renaissance, which I can see that and feel it, because there's so many breakthroughs coming through from the pandemic that we can learn from. And I think we have to not just say, let's like reform and try this new thing. Like, okay, maybe we take away tests, or maybe we add a little meditation in the classroom, and we're just adding things and thinking like we're innovative and getting better. And we are at a critical point, and it's not easy, but it's going to have to be a system shift, just like all of our systems, justice system, healthcare system, political system. And it's not going to happen. Yeah, it's not going to happen overnight. It may be like, I'm hoping in my lifetime, but maybe it's what we start to work on. I always talk about ripples, is the ripples for the next generation. So maybe like by the next generation, really some of those system shifts will happen. So like I envision a school system, because just my little world and focus is education. It's always been my passion. It is not a system to create workers. It's not industrial revolution. It's not, we need these people doing this in society. It is, education is a human right. It's part of your human development. It is nurturing your soul, your passion, your cognitive abilities, your artistic abilities, all of that. But it's about, how do you become more of a human? And through the educational experience, becoming more of a human means exploration, having space and time to find yourself and be guided by educators, advisors, counselors, even administrators. We're all facilitating those conversations of, how do you find yourself? How do you see your light and your spark? Now, within that, what are the areas that we have within a school system that we're going to give you choice? Like, you're like, I'm really into drawing, or I'm really into building things, or I'm really into doing detective work and like putting the puzzles together. Okay, here are the things that we have created that we can offer you and you can dive into. And then maybe a couple of years later, you're like, but now I'm like really into maybe trying out writing music or whatever. And it's about trying things on. And then when you get to 12th grade and you're 18 years old and about to go into the world, and you are graduating from this educational experience, now you're a legal adult, you've tried some things on. You still might not know what it is that you're going to do as far as like work making money. And the work making money doesn't have to be also your mission in life and your passion in life. So it's also having the conversation of, hey, maybe this is a really great career where you can make a good salary and you can have your own apartment, home, whatever, support a family. And you're like, but I really am driven into activism, right? I'm really driven into writing music. And you do that as well. And then maybe that also becomes, a place where you can make money. Because again, I'm not an economic person. I think that's a system shift too, the economy and all of that. But we're still going to be dealing with currency. We're still going to need to pay for things. So the reality in the education system is we still need to set you up for like skill learning. And here are things where you can use skills to make money so you can survive, right? That still needs to be there. But I think it needs to be more about, how are you developing into a person? How are you finding your joy? And when you find your joy and you find your inner peace, you automatically then like want to give back to community, because you want to share it. You want to share it with the world. Like when you have inner peace with yourself and you feel like, oh, I know my gift, I know my light, you're not like just wanting to keep that here, or like, I just want to climb a ladder to make like X, Y dollars. You're like, I want to share that in my writing a book. I want to share that in my activism. I want to share that in the music or the play that I'm writing, whatever that is. And then you're already giving back to the community, because giving back to the community isn't just community service. Or doing charity work. It's art, right? It's mentorship. It's building. It's whatever that is, that skill and that passion that you have. And so I feel like they do a lot of this in elementary school, and then we lose it come middle school. And even by like 7th grade, we are still in the mindset of, we have to check all these boxes. You have to have all this on your transcript, because this is what's going to get you into college, or these are the credits you need to have in order to graduate, to do whatever. So if we took away the college thing and said, that's still an option for people, then why do you need all these credits in all these subjects, but by the time you get to 12th grade, like if I'm going to go into construction or go into the art field or go into like, why would I need 4 credits of math or 4 credits of science or whatever that is? Like, what if I need credits in just the things I'm interested in, and that's going to help me then advance to the next level in whatever that industry is. And so it's doable.
Yes.
But I think what scares people at the top is that our system is so huge and it's been this way for like over 100 years that we don't know where to begin. And I think the first place is conversations. And I would love to see more teachers having access to policy work. And that's like another part of like this podcast is kind of the beginning, but my mission is like people like you, people like me and other wonderful teachers I've talked to actually having a voice and connection to people that are doing policy work in education, and then actually listening to us and maybe infusing and doing little bits of this system change. Because it's important. Like you can't just listen to politicians. You can't just listen to people that have been in a government job forever, even if maybe they were in education 20 years ago. Like you need the active teachers right now having access to people making these decisions. Because right now, again, that's a system shift. We're not making decisions. We're not.
And I think things can be phased in, because if we say collectively, okay, we're going to change education. Awesome. How? Why? What? When? Like we need to answer a lot of questions. And I think when you put teachers at the table and parents and people who didn't have a traditional high school, middle school, elementary upbringing, people from different countries, from different languages, from different ideas, from different worlds, something can be built. And if we start to phase things in, or we say, okay, phase 1, we're going to try, like I'm a very big advocate for leadership and empowerment. I think that everyone should have leadership skills or be shown leadership skills. And that doesn't mean that you lead necessarily a country, but you can lead a small community group, a book club, your family, whatever. You can do whatever, build whatever. We do phase 1 of fusing something in, piloting something. Like, for example, there have been studies about like 4-day work weeks. Okay, that had to go through a pilot study. Then we're checking, okay, well, is this working? How do we know it's working? When something's not working, do we know it's not working? And yes, you'll see problems right away, but some problems you won't see right away. You might get to phase 4 of something and say, whoa, we have to go back and change something. Where did this go wrong? We're using a lot of data and we're using a lot of different numbers in the system. And that's great. However, what are we doing with those numbers? What are we doing with that data? Are we taking that data and saying, wow, look, there's an 82% graduation rate. Awesome. Well, what about the other 18%? And I think I did the math right. So what about the other 18%? You know, what's happening to those 18%? And I spoke with an education administrator a while ago, and he told me, and he's a superintendent, and he said, well, we have 95% graduation rate. The other 5%, ugh. And I said, what is that? What's going on there? And he goes, yeah, those kids are just struggling. And I mean, it's a lost cause. And I was like, whoa, I'm like, you are talking to someone and you have no clue who I am, what context I'm in. And I said to him, well, maybe you should focus on the 5%. Maybe you should look at the 5% and see, well, what's happening to those 5% of kids who are not passing, because something's going on that they're not graduating. Because I don't think, and this is just my opinion, but I don't think anybody wakes up and says, you know what? I'm not going to try today. Like actively not try. And then the next day they just keep saying, I'm not going to try. I'm not going to try. There's something that's triggering that I don't feel like doing this. I'm not going to go to my math. I'm going to cut my math class or my English class or my science, whatever, because I don't want to X, Y, and Z. There's something along that child's life. And maybe we'll be able to find it as a team, as problem solvers, but sometimes we don't know. So let's sit down, speak with families. Don't contact the child and the parent and say, you know, your kid's not going to school. You contact them like, hey, is everything okay?
Yes.
What resources do you need? How about you guys come into the school and let's talk? And I think if school leaders started doing that,
Yeah.
because many teachers call, and sometimes I think when kids get letters home or phone calls home and it says this is from the principal, they sit up and go, oh no. But let's build that conversation. Let's build that community. Schools should be they should be lighthouses in the community. They should be the ones saying, we're working, we're helping the community, we're building things, we're creating things. You want help? You don't know where to go in terms of a resource? Come on down to the school. Let's take a look at it. Because you never know what you can create unless you talk about it. Like you said, with conversations. Let's have these conversations and then let's act upon these. And it's awesome that politicians and local lawmakers are trying to build different initiatives within schools. Let's all work together.
Yeah.
Let's build that solution.
Yeah. I think as many different stakeholders as you can bring to the table, including students too. And if you bring the parents, the students, the teachers, the counselors, the administrators, the school board members, the local representatives at the same table, all sharing their perspective and actively listening and really being open to taking in suggestions and then compromising, then everyone feels empowered because everyone knows they're not going to get exactly what they want, but they're going to know that my voice was heard and suggestions were, possibly like will be new initiatives and we'll all do this together. And even if it's just a little change for the next year, everyone feels like they're going into a community that they all have buy-in. They all take part in it and it's not dictated because a lot of the school system is still very punitive and it's very about you did this wrong or you did this wrong. And it's not coming from a place of compassion of like, wait, how can I support you? What's going on? We need to have conversation about the root and not putting band-aids on or just punishing. Or it's all about competition. Like, look at these stellar students. And then we're like, here are these students who really aren't doing well. And then we get a whole chunk in the middle get lost and kids fall through the cracks. And if, again, we come from a place of everyone's part of this conversation of like, what do we want to see in school? And definitely having student voice, like knowing you're not going to get everything you want. You're not going to have like a napping period for an hour, right? You're not going to have, like roller coasters in the back of the school, whatever like their ideas would be. But that they can, if they feel like they're taken seriously, they can come up with some amazing ideas. Like just recently in my psychology class, because we finished a unit on learning, I had them journal about the future school. And they didn't think these outlandish ideas that would just never be possible. They like literally started with what you and me are talking about. I want life skills classes. I want choice in curriculum starting in, if not 9th grade, at least 10th grade, not 12th grade when I'm about to graduate. I would like to have more space in my schedule to actually just like have some downtime, but also like see my teachers or do the work that I need to because I have way too much homework outside of school. Like these are things that we actually can do like next year. And they're not big asks. And they just, even if they saw one of those things change next year. So one thing we are doing next year is to bring life skills minors to our program. That's awesome. And that one little thing that is super manageable, I can see the kids being like, oh my gosh, they're listening to us. We've been saying this for years. And it was actually an alumni that came back saying, that's one thing I wish our school had were these life skill classes. You do one little thing like that each year and you're listening to students, they're just going to have so much more buy-in and feel like, wow, someone takes me seriously because ultimately we're doing it for them. We already went through it and it was crappy. Like we already went through it. The admin already went through it. The parents already went through it. The kids are in it. So why aren't we asking them for what they would like to see in school? And again, being reasonable and things that, are compromises we can make. And I just would like to see exactly what you're talking about more, just infusing joy, infusing this sense of agency, the sense of like, can I be a human here? Can people just listen to me and have a choice in what I want to learn and have this sense of passion. And it's not rocket science, and it's not, that does not need to take 10 years to change it, you know? So I don't know. I'm starting this kind of journey of, it's hard. Nobody gets back to you, but I'm at least trying to start reaching out to policymakers and like local school board members. And I'm in a private school, so just even like within my own town and representatives, and trying to like find a way to like, can we meet to have like a conversation? Can we, you know, maybe you want to be interviewed, but maybe you just want to start like picking their brains, but also like, I want to know more about the system, because like I still feel like I'm in it, but I'm like on the outside and don't fully understand why it's so difficult to make these changes. So like, I feel like I want to do some investigative work and find out what is going on behind the scenes and all this, and not come in a place of like, I'm here to disrupt it and crash it all down, but like, tell me about it. Tell me about this work. Let me share with you like my perspective and ideas as a teacher and what my students tell me. How can we like somehow work together, and just starting local? You know, it starts with having those conversations. Absolutely. You're doing it with your students all the time.
I try. And I started reading a lot more about trauma-informed education and how adverse childhood experiences can create cardiac issues and all these different things. And you would think, well, something like going through a negative experience, can that necessarily cause my body harm? Yes. Traumatic experiences that people are going through now that are not being addressed in policies, that are not being addressed in education, can have a lasting impact. And I think if we start by looking at current research, looking at the classrooms, talking to the teachers, like you said, and talking to administrators, seeing where the holes and the gaps are, looking at quantitative data, looking at qualitative data, looking at everything, the whole picture. And it's hard to get the whole picture sometimes, but looking at trends and really looking at why, how, what's going on. Inviting people into class, policymakers into classrooms to see what things are actually like, that can make the difference. And I feel, and this is just one person's perspective, if we start with trauma-informed education and looking at, wow, everyone just went through this collective trauma of COVID-19, and that's going to change a lot. What are we doing as a result? Because some of the kids I have in my school, the last time they were in school was when they were in 6th grade. And now they're in 9th grade, 10th grade, and they're acting, quote, quote, like middle schoolers or elementary school students in different settings. Something's going on, and we can yell and stomp and scream and cry and whatever, but we need to look at things from a solution-oriented perspective. Talking to those policymakers, building things within classrooms, embracing community members and teachers and leaders, and saying, hey, it's okay to be human. Let's try something, not just throw it away 2 seconds later. Let's look at our values. Let's look at our mission. Let's look at our vision. What can we create, and what realistically can we create? What can we try? What can we build? And then do the thing. And build. And then who knows?
And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So what? It's an experiment. I mean, if you think about it, our whole country is an experiment.
Yeah.
And we're feeling some of the, the consequences of the experiment. But everything's an experiment. And so, yeah, I think we need to take calculated risks. I think we are playing it too safe still in schools. I think just keeping status quo is playing it safe. And we just need to take calculated risks and trying one new thing at a time. And if we actually have people coming together and sharing that relationship building and building bridges between the different people, then it creates this sense of like, oh, this actually can change, because now we're all sharing our voices and it matters. It's not just like we're just being told what to do, but we need to challenge it a little bit. So that disruption. So I think more and more teachers standing up and saying, you know, this has been this way for a long time, and really it's not working. Can we talk about it? Can we talk about some things we can do differently? Like, can we talk about like 8 classes in a day is just not sustainable? Can we talk about like homework for 8 classes or whatever, 6 classes a day is just not sustainable for children, and testing and all that. And like, what are like those tweaks we can make for next year and the next year and the next year, until maybe over time that becomes like the system shift, because I don't think it's going to completely collapse and then we just rebuild. I mean, that we don't want that to happen either, because we have to live in it at the same time. So, you know, I talked to many teachers early on. This was like last spring when everything was like, transition teacher, get me out of here, all this stuff. And again, rightfully so for people who had to have a new career track. But a lot of the tone was, that's why I had to get out of some of these circles. And like, I wanted to do something uplifting and positive, but it's just all going to collapse. Like the whole system's going to collapse. And maybe that's what needs to happen so that it can be different. And I'm like, no, that actually can't happen, because there's people in it, you know, and I still care about the people in it, the students, the parents of the students, the teachers that want to stay in it, at least for whatever time being. So internally, we got to figure out these small shifts for maybe the big system shift. And over time, like, again, it might be the next generation. Maybe it is this place of joy and exploration and choice and agency and all of that. I mean, I believe that can happen.
Well, keep the foundation, renovate the house.
Yeah, I love, I'm going to write that down. Yes, I love that. That's exactly how we should see these shifts. Yeah, because can't get rid of the whole house, because then what are we going to do?
Even if you look, I've seen pictures of natural disasters where houses are demolished, and I look at those pictures and say, that's really sad. They're going to really need to rebuild, and the foundation's there. So not all is lost. And in education, the teachers are there. The students are there. Let's inspire, let's create, let's do. We can't shut down the system of education or the prison system or the political system or the agriculture system and go, well, we'll look at this next year. No, we're all living, we're all doing. Let's keep the foundation, whatever that may look like, and let's renovate.
Yeah.
What's the difference of adding some new windows? Maybe we need some new doors, some fresh sheetrock, who knows?
Yeah, I love that.
Metaphorically, of course.
That's a great way to end this. I love it. Keep the foundation, renovate the house. I don't know, that might be the title of this episode. Allison, you're so wonderful.
Thank you.
And you're not too far away from, I'm in Jersey, you're in New York. We should meet up sometime and have some coffee, because I would love to meet you in person and be in this light, this aura that you have coming off of you. It's so amazing. So for our listeners, is there any information you want to share about where people can find you, or any contact information? I'll put that in the show notes.
Please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm under Allison Teicher-Farhbach. I love having education conversations, whether it's text, Zoom, whatever you'd like, phone call. If you're in New York and you want to get coffee, just say, hey, like, why don't we go get some coffee and talk education? Sure, why not? Like, let's start building, let's start creating, let's start doing the thing, let's start getting groups of teachers and leaders and parents and everyone together so we can start to renovate the house.
I love it. Maybe this is a coalition that will start.
All
renovate the house.
All abilities welcome.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. And this has just been such a joy. I love your story. It is amazing. And you have such energy and such humor. My cheeks kind of hurt in parts of laughing so much. So I really enjoyed this conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.